Setelah mengalami keadaan anomali pada tahun 2022 dan mencapai level tertingginya, harga komoditas batu bara kembali mengalami normalisasi dan penurunan yang cukup signifikan pada bulan-bulan pertama di tahun 2023 ini. Dan sekarang saya sudah berada di kantor PT Bayan Resources Tbk dan kita akan berdiskusi bersama dengan Chief Financial Officer dari Bayan Resources, Mr. Alastair McLeod, untuk bagaimana Bayan Resources menghadapi normalisasi dari harga komoditas batu bara yang terjadi di tahun ini, bagaimana forecast untuk batu bara ke depannya, seperti apa bentuk-bentuk corporate social responsibility yang dijalankan Bayan, dan bagaimana implementasi dari environmental, social, and governance dalam Bayan menjalankan operasionalnya, eksklusif di CNBC Indonesia Mining Zone bersama saya, Safrina Nasution. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you for having us in your office.
Not a problem.
So we're going to talk about the fluctuations and the normalizations of coal prices in our recent ones, and we're going to discuss how it affects Bayan's performance in general.
Certainly.
Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you. For having us with you.
Thank you.
Anda menyaksikan Mining Zone CNBC Indonesia bersama saya Safrina Nasution dan telah bergabung secara eksklusif dengan CNBC Indonesia Chief Financial Officer of Bayan Resources Tbk, Mr. Alastair McLeod. How are you, Alastair?
Fine, thank you.
A
Welcome
pleasure.
to Byan Resources.
And a pleasure to have you with CNBC Indonesia.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, our first question is about the commodity coal prices. Compared to what we have in 2022, where there's an anomaly and a skyrocketed price, this year there's quite a normalization in price, which today is around 134-ish for the price itself. But as we've seen in this past recent weeks, there's quite an increase in coal prices because it was supported by the heat wave that hit Asia and also Europe. Does Byan consider it as a relatively good news? How do you generally see it?
You'd previously mentioned that the coal price had spiked last year due to the Ukraine conflict. It's still at a relatively high, elevated level. So $130, $140 Newcastle price is still much higher than we would believe the long-term normal price is. So yes, there has been slight support to recent coal prices because of the hot weather in Europe, but the coal in Asia, not much of it goes to Europe nowadays, and so it's really more the weather in China and India that affects the Asian coal price.
Sure. And now moving on to the performance of Byan, especially in this first semester of 2023. Anyway, congratulations for an amazing performance in 2022.
Thank you.
Sir, now the first semester in 2023, how is Byan performance and comparing it to the performance you had in 2022 first half?
Okay, when you compare it year on year, we view it as quite successful. In relation to production volumes and sales volumes, we've grown approximately 40-odd%. So for the first half of 23, we've achieved roughly 24 million tons sales and production. That's a big increase, and site have worked hard to achieve that. So for on the areas that we can control, we think we've done quite well. Obviously, market prices have been lower than last year. So overall, our financial performance has dropped slightly. We were able to make up a little bit of ground by the increase in sales volumes, but overall profitability has dropped by about 25% on last year's same period results.
And do you see it as a concern for the first half of 2023?
No, not really. The price was at an unusually high level, and therefore the margins we were achieving were way beyond we would anticipate as a steady state. So margins are still healthy. EBITDA margins are still over 40%. So that's still very good business for us.
Margins are still healthy, still considerably strong. And what are actually the driving factors for Byan's performance, especially in the first semester of 2023, not only the increase of sales volume, sir?
Look, as well as sales volumes, the other element that we try and keep control of is our overall costs. Costs have increased slightly on a per ton basis.
On a per ton basis.
One of the contributing factors was the change in regulation law at the end of last year. That a new royalty rate was announced by the ESDM and the Finance Ministry. So that's worked its way through, and we've been fully affected by that in the first half of the year, which has led to a slight increase in our costs. However, we have managed to maintain those cost increases, maintain the stripping ratio at our mines, and limited the overhaulage distance. So we've worked hard to limit the cost increases at the moment.
And now moving on to the challenge. Seeing the first performance for the first half of 2023, what are the obstacles and challenges were faced by Byan in the first half of 2023, but not necessarily only the falling of commodity prices, sir?
Well, I think when we were trying to rapidly expand production, so obviously we had to work closely with our contractors. There's issues of machinery availability, manpower availability. All of that has to be worked through before you can actually achieve results. So this is just part of the ongoing long-term planning. So it's not as though we try and increase production this year. The decision to do that has been made more than a year ago. So it's just keeping track of where we are in relation to ordering equipment, ensuring the training of manpower. And then the other biggest element that is beyond our control is really the weather.
The weather.
Weather in that, I know it sounds simple, but when it rains, operations cease from a safety perspective. And then it takes time to regrade roads and make the operating conditions safe. So the weather, how often it rains, how long it rains, how heavy it rains, that can impact production and efficiency by up to 20%, plus or minus 20%.
And does this translating to the performance in the first half of 2023, relating to the weather and also climate change?
Yeah, the weather definitely impacts us. In the first half of this year, the weather was actually quite supportive, so we didn't have too much weather. It was quite dry, although not too dry to avoid impact the barging operations. So it's a combination. Our mine site is split over currently about 65 kilometers. So it's different weather patterns in different areas.
For sure. And now, this has been the most general questions for every coal producers regarding the falling commodity prices, the normalization. I would call it the normalizations of coal prices, Alastair. Has this normalization in coal prices, especially in this first half of 2022, do you see it will begin to weigh on the performance of Byan itself?
Look, it will definitely impact the overall margins and profit that we achieve, but it doesn't affect our long-term goal. Our long-term goal to further expand out of the Tabang operations. We've been investing in a new logistical route and building out infrastructure for about the last 3 years. That's just coming to an end at the end of this year. So no, the current drop in commodity prices doesn't impact our long-term strategy. We will continue to expand operations, and we're sure that when commodity prices pick up again, we'll be well placed to benefit from that.
For sure. And we will continue our conversation after the break. Thank you so much for that, Alastair.
Thank you.
Dan diskusi bersama dengan Chief Financial Officer Byan Resources Tbk Alastair McLeod akan kita lanjutkan usai jeda. Tetap bersama kami di Mining Zone CNBC Indonesia.